Hello and welcome to The Catalyst, a podcast by Firstport, taking you inside social investment. In each episode, we speak to people operating inside the social investment world, whether that's a founder, a social investor, or a partner in the ecosystem. We are going to demystify social investment and explore what social investment is, what it means to be investment ready, and what it means to fund a social enterprise. I am Emily Macdonald and I head up the investment programmes at Firstport. And today I'm joined by Susan Aktemel, founder and chief executive of Homes for Good, Scotland's first social enterprise letting agency, established in 2013. Susan brings together property expertise and a strong commitment to social change, aiming to provide high-quality homes for people on low incomes while supporting landlords with ethical, transparent services. Before tackling housing, Susan began her career in adult education and founded Impact Arts, which is now a major Scottish arts and regeneration charity. Susan left Impact Arts in 2012 and used her property development skills and experience as a private landlord to launch Homes for Good in 2013. And since then, Susan and the team have raised more than £20 million in social investment to build a portfolio of over 360 quality homes for people with limited housing options, along with managing a further 240 properties for landlords across the west of Scotland through the letting agency. So we're going to start by taking you back to the 90s. You began your career in adult education and community arts, and you founded Impact Arts in the early 90s. But what drew you into that sector?
I ended up, as you said, as an adult education tutor. And I was working with adult literacy and numeracy. And then I ended up running an adult education project. And I think at the start of your career, when you're young, you take opportunities and you try different things. And what I recognised was that actually people's lives started to change and their confidence started to increase more when they were getting involved in creative activities than necessarily the more academic sort of English and maths and different things like that. So I've always loved the arts. So I ended up in this situation where I was working indirectly with the arts for the first time. I also had already decided that I was going to devote my professional efforts to helping people in initially Glasgow's communities change their lives for the better. But I also had a really burning ambition to set up my own business.
Right.
I wanted to have my own business. And so I came up with this idea that at the time was, and I got quite a lot of kickback from people around creating an arts management agency. And I started as a sole trader, but the whole focus of my work was going to be in communities and delivering community-based art projects and managing them and making sure that the funding was in place and making sure that artists got paid and the right reports got written. So I think it was probably the earliest iteration of a social business, one of the earliest social businesses in Scotland before social enterprise was even a term that people use.
Yeah.
But it was really just a combination of I wanted to be my own boss, I was entrepreneurial, and I wanted to work in the arts. And so I created my own business out of all of those ingredients.
Yeah, what an amazing thing you built as well. I mean, Impact Arts grew significantly over the years that you were there, and you secured £4 million worth of funding in that time, which is incredible. But what did that experience teach you about building and then funding a social impact organisation?
When I think back over the 18 years of Impact Arts, we probably turned over close to 15, 16 million in the time that I was there, over the years as it built up. And the £4 million, that came towards the end of my time at Impact Arts. So we secured that money from Inspiring Scotland as grant funding. I think it was in about 2009, 2010. And it was actually for to do two things. It was to scale Impact Arts across Scotland, but it was also to put us on a long-term trajectory of sustainability. So it was an opportunity. That fund came about at a point where I was already feeling like this organisation is not as sustainable as it needs to be at this point. So this injection, this opportunity for this to apply for this money was a big one. So I went for it, and we spent a lot of time mapping out what the programme should look like. And it was very ambitious. At the time, we were one of the smallest organisations and got the second biggest grant award from Inspire in Scotland. And I was really proud of that. And it enabled us to scale into Ayrshire, into Edinburgh, and into the borders, as well as scaling and strengthening what we were doing in Glasgow. Absolutely brilliant to see that Impact Arts is still going strong the way it is now. The interesting thing for me in that, so we got this big injection of cash, which is effectively a funder saying, okay, we'll back you to do what you said you want to do. And weirdly for me, I can say this now, I started to lose interest pretty quickly after we got that funding. And I think there was a couple of reasons for that. One, you're never going to get that again. It was like when you're an entrepreneur and you're sort of driven by doing the deal and chasing things. When you get them, you sort of go, oh, right, okay. But also, I think that was coincided with the financial crash and public sector were really kicking in. And I think also at that time, I knew that I'd been in Impact Arts for about 15, 16 years at that point, and I didn't have the energy to see it through for another 10 years. And also, I wasn't a charity CEO. By that time, we turned Impact Arts into a charity, and I didn't think I was the right mindset and personality for a charity CEO. So that was what happened towards the end of that. But yeah, I think also we didn't really have any social investment in Impact Arts. It was a very small amount. I know that we want to focus on talking about social investment here. But, it was a brilliant time. And I think, the name Impact Arts was completely ahead of its time, if you think about it, because in 1994, the reason I came up with that name is because I wanted to make an impact on people's lives using the arts. So it was logical. But now everybody talks about social impact organisations. Yeah. It's a pretty interesting journey.
Absolutely. And you left it in a good place. So when you did move on, after nearly 2 decades, you left Impact Arts and then you quite quickly went on to found Homes for Good. So what sparked that transition and what sort of inspired you to start Homes for Good?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. What happened in the transition with Impact Arts, and I've been very open about this in various conversations that we've had. When it got to 2011, I really had burnout. I really had quite a serious burnout episode, and I think I'd had enough. And Impact Arts was and is and continues to be an absolutely brilliant organisation. But personally, 18 years is a long time to do anything.
It's a long time.
And I think there were a number of things going on for me. I'd taken Impact Arts as far as I felt I could. Also, I'd already been quite heavily involved in property as a landlord and a sort of small-scale property developer with my husband and his business.
Right.
So I love property. I've always loved property. So I actually was active almost in evenings and weekends, building a property portfolio of our own, and that was managed by letting agents. So that was all going on at the time. We navigated through the financial crash quite well. We were very lucky, I hasten to add, but we came out of it relatively unscathed. And I think that as I was sort of experiencing this burnout episode that I had in September 2011, it would have been, that I knew that was time for me to go from Impact Arts and for us to find a chief executive. But I also had great faith that I would recover and that there was another business in me. And I wanted to start something new, but I didn't really have any idea what it was going to be. But we still had this property stuff going on. So in 2011, the other thing that happened that was an important turning point was that I won the social entrepreneur category of the Ernst & Young Awards.
Brilliant.
And that took me into a completely different professional network of the private sector, of scaling businesses, of ambitious ambitious businesses and entrepreneurs, and actually a lot of high net worth and a world of investment.
Right.
So I pushed myself and I really embraced that world and got very involved in that programme, because it was almost me morphing into the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened, and the reason that Homes for Good was actually born, was that there's a lot of regulation has happened in the private rented sector in the last sort of 10 to 15 years. And after 2 of our letting agents that managed their properties either went bust, or we decided the service was so poor that we had to change, my husband suggested that I became a letting agent. And my reaction to that was, well, why would I do that? And he said, do it the way that you do things. And then I instantly saw it. I thought, it's a social enterprise. It'll be values led. It'll feel different. It'll be asset locked. And that was really how the whole idea came about. And then I became quite obsessed with it. Mm-hmm. So it was almost like leaving Impact Arts was not difficult for me, because I then had a new venture and a new baby essentially to start focusing on. And that was also when I started the journey where I had this idea of not only having a letting agency that was quite unique at the time, but also creating an investment portfolio, because I could see the need and the sort of social need and the economic opportunity to create homes for people in Glasgow. Mm-hmm. So that was how it all came about. And you'll know from the entrepreneurs that you work with that once an entrepreneur gets an idea in their mind, they can become quite obsessive about it.
Yeah, it can take over
in the early stages. Yeah, so it was a brilliant time.
Yeah.
Brilliant time.
So once you decided social enterprise was the way you were going to go, how quickly were you able to find support? So you obviously joined the Launch Me program quite soon after founding Homes for Good. But was that the first support that you found, or what? How did you find the sector at that point?
So it was actually a really brilliant process that I went through, because if you think about, or if I think about my trajectory through the social enterprise world, Impact Arts became one of the most recognised social enterprises in Scotland. Think about the rise of social enterprise probably from about 2004 onwards. I was recognised as a social entrepreneur through Impact Arts, so I could see all the ecosystem forming and all the funding support that was available. I was involved in the early stages of Firstport. I was involved in the early stages of the Social Enterprise Academy. So I was already in that social enterprise world. Mm-hmm. So to come back in 2012 as a startup was really brilliant. Yeah. Because I was starting a new business from scratch. And actually there's very few social entrepreneurs in Scotland that have done that they create, they go again and they create another one. So I got a lot of moral support. I got a lot of professional support, and I actually went all the way through Firstport. So I started with the little £5,000 grant where I got my incorporation done and my logo designed and all my business cards printed up and all that early stage stuff. Yeah. And then I got the next step up, which is where you get a little bit of a sort of in lieu of salary, living expenses for a year. Yeah. And that was before Launch Me. Yeah. So I fully embraced the ecosystem that was there at the time and needed it. Yeah. I also got funding from Resilient at that point in the first sort of year or two. And Homes for Good wouldn't be here without that very, very early support. So I'm a sort of disciple of that whole startup process and the support that you guys give to us all along the way.
It's just brilliant that you managed to find the support you needed at the time you needed it and you knew what was out there. Because that's the purpose of this podcast, really, is to help us raise awareness of the support that's here in the sector and of the different investments that there are. So it's brilliant to talk to someone like yourself who's managed to sort of go through that whole process and you can tell people what it's like. So what did you learn from, let's start with the investment readiness program. What did you learn from the program and how did it help you then to go on to find the investment that you needed?
So in 2014, I think when I started Launch Me, I already knew quite a lot about running a business and running an organisation. So that sort of early stage teaching wasn't wholly as relevant for me. But the things that were relevant were having the cohort of peers. Yeah. And I absolutely loved being part of a group of people who were starting their first social enterprise. And I wasn't that much ahead of the game. My social enterprise was brand new as well. So the cohort approach was brilliant. The pitching to investors and having to learn the discipline of doing that and thinking through what investors might need was also really, really good, because I'd also not done that before, although I was actively starting to do that. And I think the opportunity, LaunchMe was really ahead of its time, I think, in the programme design, that grant funding was available. If you go and get the right investor, we will match that with grant. It's a massive incentive, both for you as an entrepreneur, but also for the investor. It de-risks the investor as well. So it was really, it was a really brilliant process for me to go through, and I was successful in raising angel investment, exactly the right type of angel investment, and then getting some match money towards that as well from LaunchMe. So it was good.
That is brilliant. And then you've gone on now to raise a lot of money. So you've raised more than £20 million now in funding and investment for Homes for Good. And you use that obviously to acquire and renovate homes. In that process of raising investment, what are the key things that you take to investors, or you need to have ready to go to an investor?
The first thing that entrepreneurs need to do is understand their own business model and the finances, the numbers really, really well before they even talk to an investor. Because if your numbers don't stack up and you don't understand the level of investor return that they might want, it's not going to go anywhere. So actually, it's not a bad thing to do all your homework at the beginning and realise this isn't really an investable service. That's not a bad thing, because you're saving yourself a lot of time and you're not wasting your time or investors' time. But equally, if you do your numbers at the beginning and you understand how investment could work in your business and you're confident, that is really, really motivating. So when I think about raising money right back at the beginning with Homes for Good it took me 2 years to raise our first £2 million.
Right.
And a lot of people said no. A lot of people said no at the beginning. And I kept asking why. I would ask them why, and then I would sort of tweak and change my model, and I would listen to the why. But the thing that I knew, the reason that it took me 2 years and I kept going back, is that I did all my numbers right at the very beginning, and I knew it stacks up financially, as well as there being really good social impact. I completely believed in my model. So I thought I just need to keep going until somebody says yes, because the numbers do stack up. And the reasons why people were saying no wasn't about the financial return, actually. It was more about it didn't fit what they wanted to invest in, or they didn't like the structure, or they were nervous about the social element of it, or they were nervous that it was a wee bit too private. There was all, but none of it was about the actual financial model itself. So that would be the number one thing I would say, is that, and get comfortable with understanding your financial model, and do not rely on other people to do it for you. You have to know it yourself, because you're the one that is going to be getting interrogated by everybody about it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's where we provide the most support, actually, because not everyone is a spreadsheet person and not everybody loves a financial model. But that's not the important thing. I mean, even if we provide you with support to create your financial model and your forecast, it's just important that you understand what the model's the story, I guess, the story behind the numbers. So what the model's saying that you'll achieve over the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And if you know that, and you know what your business plan is and what you want to achieve, then you're right. That's what investors want to know. Did you find when you were talking to investors that they were interested not only in the numbers, but also in the impact you were making? Was that a difference that you found when you were talking to social investors rather than other types of lenders?
So we've never worked with any investors in Homes for Good that are not social investors. All of our investors have had some sort of social focus. And my experience of them all is that they wouldn't be talking to us if we didn't have some sort of demonstrable social impact.
Yeah.
but there is very little conversation about the social impact. That's my experience.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting, I'll do a little shout out for Social Investment Scotland and CIS Ventures, because I went on to the investment committee for CIS Ventures in the first couple of years of its life. And the way that Social Investment Scotland took the potential investees through their impact journey was really robust.
Right.
Really, really good. I've not experienced that level of due diligence from our investors, but that could equally be because our impact is actually very obvious, and by the time we go in, I had already identified the impact story for Homes for Good.
Yeah.
So we were able to say, this is who our tenants will be, this is the impact that we'll have. It's quite obvious what Homes for Good impact is. But I would say that the bulk of the due diligence is around financial, and the bulk of the sort of reporting and the conversations are around financial. And that isn't a criticism, because the whole point of investment is that you get your money back. So it has to be around financial. It's not a grant. It's not a grant that there's less. If something doesn't work out, it's a learning thing. Investors invest on the basis that they're going to get their money back out. So it's reasonable that the fund managers spend so much time looking at the finances.
Absolutely. So if a founder's listening to this right now and they're looking at a grant for the project, or they're looking at a repayable investment, what kind of pointers would you give them? What kind of things have you used grant funding for versus what you've used social investment for? Because I've got this opportunity now to speak to you because you've used both.
So I would say that the grant serves probably two purposes. But effectively, you're using grants where the financial return doesn't stack up for investment. If you think about it I'm not talking about charities now, I'm talking about businesses and social impact businesses. So we have got big parts of our organisation now don't have any grant funding in them, in theory, and I'll come back to that, because the income, so the investment generates, we buy houses, those houses generate rental income, and the business model in theory should work. So that is self-funding. So the grant income is needed either because there is a gap between the level of return that the investor requires and the level of return that the service can give. That sometimes happens. Doesn't happen enough. But that's a whole other podcast of its own, I think. Or you would use grant funding when the element that delivers social impact just can't be paid for out of the business model, but it is absolutely vital nonetheless. So I'll give you an example of that in Homes for Good. We provide support called tenancy sustainment to a number of the people who are in our homes. Now, the rental income that those tenants generate, if you like, funds the management of their home, the return to the investors, all the repairs, the insurance, all the things that you would expect to do with managing a property. But it doesn't leave enough over for us to do the work that we really want to do that makes a deep difference to people's lives. Like supporting somebody who's been in a psychiatric ward for 6 months to move into their first home. That sort of work where it is real deep social impact and also saving the public purse tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds, that can't be paid for out of our income, the rental income that we generate. So that is an example of where grant funding ideally would come in. There is an absolute value. You can demonstrate the return socially and potentially financially, but without grant income, we couldn't do that work. It's very special actually, and our holy grail is that we don't need grant funding. We don't want to have grant funding. We want to be completely self-reliant and make our own way and make our own decisions. But there's probably about 10% of our income needs to be grant funded, and we just have to accept that and hope that the funders that are around us see the work in what we do, and they seem to. But what I would say to founders that are at the beginning of this is just be very realistic about your business model and understand what bits need grant funding and what bits you can generate the right level of income that then generate the return that would sustain taking on loans or some sort of investment. Mm-hmm. The other area where grant funding is really, really important, and we've got this just now, and there's not enough of this sort of funding, is when an organisation wants to grow and scale and they just need investment in infrastructure.
Yeah.
So that might be about better software systems, or maybe a post that's like a central post, like a more experienced finance manager. Those things that are like overhead costs for business, but you need them to enable you to grow, but you've not yet got the income.
Yeah, but it'll help you earn more.
That's another area where, so that's a plea to funders that, and there are some funders that are brilliant that completely accept that, but if every funder was receptive to that, when you can demonstrate that this organisation delivers really worthwhile social impact, then having the flexibility of being able to invest in the infrastructure is really, really good.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's those operating costs, the sort of an injection of capital to sort of increase the operating base so then you can then grow, that's really needed. You should take a look at our Step Up loan, Susan. That's exactly why we designed that one, because that is exactly that. It's an injection of cash to put into the business to help you take what you're doing already and grow it and take it to the next level. But that is a loan. It's an interest-free loan, but it's still a loan. So through your journey, you've worked closely with grant funders and investors. What have you learned about how to build relationships and gain the trust of investors? Because I think it's those relationships, and you've done that really well, sort of building those relationships and getting trust in what you're doing to be able to sort of get the investment and grow your business.
The first thing is a cliche, but it is completely true. People buy people. Mm-hmm. So there is something about believing, 100% believing in your product or your service. And if you believe in it and you're enthusiastic about it and you care about it and you're a good communicator, people will buy into what you're selling, but people will buy into your enthusiasm and your inspiration and your commitment. And it's one of the things that I've had as feedback over the years is that people say things to me like, your enthusiasm just oozes out of you. It's really obvious how much you care about this. And that's even on days when I'm showing up and I'm feeling a bit meh about it, but I'm showing up anyway. So there is something about really putting effort, and it's not something that I do in a sort of artificial way, but there is just something about recognising that all eyes are on you as founder or as the chief executive if you're looking to raise grant funding or you're looking to raise investment, particularly. And I think, Mike, particularly if you're starting with a relationship. And most funding does start with a relationship of some kind, mm-hmm. apart from some of the very formulaic, traditional funding routes. But most of it is an initial conversation and getting people on board and buying into what you want to do and why it's important. So that would be the first thing. The second thing that I feel is, and this is at the initial investment stage, is, so I talk about stats, statistics and stories. So I always talk about knowing your spreadsheet, but also having the stories that tell the story of what you want to do. And my experience over the years is that people, even the hard-nosed investors, will vote with their hearts. Mm-hmm. Because the numbers are really to back up what you want them to want to do it. And then the numbers should back it up and make the decision an easy one to make. But and having been on the other side of being on an investment committee, the founder has got a real crucial role in really making the investors feel the value of what they want to do. So that's another thing. And then just going on to once the relationship's established and building trust, I think that's about being completely honest all the time. And sometimes you have to be brave about that, because I think that as social entrepreneurs and CEOs, particularly with, I was going to say with grant funding, but actually with investment as well, it's quite brave to show any weakness, because you worry about what will the knock-on impact be. My experience has been that our investors know everything that's going on in Homes for Good. They know all the good stuff, and they know the stuff that's a bit rocky. And I'm just very open about it. And what's the worst that can happen, really? Because if you don't tell an investor about things that you're worrying about, they might become bigger problems further down the line that cause bigger problems for you as well. And my experience has invariably been good. Then there's no surprises. Your board has no surprises. Your investors have no surprises. You feel better because you're being open and you're not having to shoulder it yourself. So there's just something building trust. Actually, counterintuitively, maybe admitting when you've messed up or admitting when something's not going right is actually a really good way of building trust in relationships. Constant touch points, and that you're celebrating the wins, and they can see the wins and the achievements as well as maybe some of the challenges as well.
Yeah, definitely. I have to say, as an investor, we really appreciate honesty, because if people are honest and they sort of share their problems, that we can help. We can sort of step in early and look at the repayment plans or adjust things that will make things easier. And honesty is so important, because we all want the same thing. We all want the business to succeed ultimately. And the earlier we can get in and help, that's the important thing. And that's what makes the difference between someone who's going to make a success of it or someone who's not. What are you most proud of? I mean, Homes for Good now has grown beyond, I imagine, all your expectations. And now you're moving out of Scotland, down into London. What are you most proud of, and what's next?
There's little things that happen every single day that I just go, oh God, I love what we're doing with this. And there's just lots of little moments every day, and it could just be a particular favourite that often finds its way onto LinkedIn on a Friday is when Sharon, our interior designer, just happens to send the photographs of a completed property just before it goes on the market or before a tenant moves in. Or last week, Scott, who's our company storyteller, had written up a tenant story that he shared with the whole team. Very difficult circumstances that a tenant had been in, and we were able to move him into another home of ours, and it just was brilliant. So there's little proud moments like that quite regularly that just make me go, right, this is good. There are all the problems along the way of the day-to-day running a business like this, but just keep going. This is really good. The thing that makes me probably proudest at the moment, and I think this is a sign of when you know that you've made a real difference, is when people start to talk to you about doing the work and using the terminology that you invented.
Love it. Yeah.
So for example, social purpose PRS, social purpose private rented sector, that is now language that's getting used quite normally by a number of organisations, by landlord organisations, and that didn't exist 10 years ago. And I think that we won the World Habitat Award in 2023, the global award that we won for our work in the private rented sector. And World Habitat then took our work and a couple of other organisations that were doing similar things in other parts of the world and created this concept of, they scooped us up and then moved us forward. So there's now a movement that's starting to happen that we were at the start of. So stuff like that makes me really proud, because that's you having an effect beyond what you touch on a day-to-day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what's next? So you're down in London now. Is there more expansion down in London, or what's the next plan?
So the plan now, London is a brilliant experiment that we were really fortunate to be able to do with lottery funding and funding from Lloyds, through our partner crisis. And it's really a replication of the Homes for Good model in London in a very, very different private rented market. So that's we're just over a year in, and it's taking its time, but it's starting to grow. And so we'll see where that goes. I think in terms of Homes for Good, there are a few things. We want to grow to 1,000 homes under management in Scotland. I've been saying that for a long time. And, COVID and interest rates and different things have always got in the way, but we're on quite a clear trajectory towards that now. And that will involve raising probably another £15 million in investment to buy more properties, expansion into other geographies in Scotland. So we're looking, obviously we're in Dumfries and Galloway now and in the borders. We're looking at Fife as well. We're actively working with partners in Fife. So expanding our reach in Scotland and potentially acquiring another letting agency to grow the homes that we have under management. So it's a combination of geographical expansion, growth of the letting agency, and further investment in our own portfolio of homes that we own. They're the three things that we're focusing on over the next couple of years.
So you're contemplating further investment? That's interesting. As you approach investors now, is there something that you wished social investors would ask you, or what more support that you could get from social investment sector?
So the number one ask or change that I would have with social investment, and this is not any surprise to anybody that's heard me talk about this before, is that the problem with social investment up until now, I sense that it might be starting to change, but up until now, the investment fund has got a set level of return that has been agreed at the outset when it was raising its money. So when you try to then get that investment, you've got to try and fit what you do into the return that the investors already decided that they need.
Right.
So the big thing that I would ask is that the tables are turned, and the starting point is what level of return can this business support? And we found that we worked recently with a credit union, Glasgow Credit Union, and that was the approach. We almost co-designed the amount of money. We showed the business model and what we wanted to do and what the social impact was. And the level of return was set in a perfect balance between what we could comfortably afford and what they would be happy for their members to accept. And that was lower at the time. It was lower than basic. So that was an example of when it works, when you have the social enterprise and the social investor completely aligned. That would be my ask. It's quite difficult to do that because you have to have all investors on board for that concept. So you need to have investors who really care deeply enough about the social impact that they may be willing to take a lower rate of return financially. So that's the one thing I would ask, that the design of what an investment fund looks like either has the flexibility built in, or that it can chop and change its return according to what the business needs, or that a fund is designed from the outset at a lower rate that enables many more social enterprises to access the right type of money.
Yeah, I'm going to take that away and think about that. Thank you. We'll take that on board. And just to finish up, for a founder who's listening now and they're trying to find the right investment for their project and looking at all the different funding options and they don't know what to do first, what advice would you give them? Where would you tell them to start?
I would tell them to start with investing a chunk of time going round the houses. And what I mean by that is, they could come and talk to you at First Port. They could go and talk to Social Investment Scotland, or if they're elsewhere in the UK, there'll be other organisations or indeed other parts of the world. But actually go through a real learning curve yourself in this world. Find out who all the different funds are. Be very open to going and having a look and seeing whether, if it says it's an impact fund or, any of the... Just be very curious and be open to investing time and exploring all the different funds that might fit. And it doesn't matter if you look at 20 of them and only 2 of them are relevant. You've learned something along the way and then you focus in on the 2. And what I would also say is, if I think about our first investment that we got, I started the actual serious conversations with them with a very, very simple spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. Very simple spreadsheet. It was the most complicated one that I could create myself at the time. And what I can remember from the beginning, and actually subsequently in every single social investor that we worked with, is that the people who worked for the funds managers, the social investors, mm-hmm. are really, really helpful, very friendly, and have got skills that we don't have. So don't be afraid to say, I don't know how to build a financial model, because they've got the ability to do that for you. You need to understand it and you need to make a commitment to understanding it. But I think there's just something about invest time in asking lots of questions, maybe kissing a lot of frogs. Just go through that journey, because each interaction you have, you're going to learn something more about what's right and what's going to work. And it's almost like you keep tweaking and then one day you potentially get a yes, and that's it.
So I just want to say a huge thank you to Susan for being here today and for sharing all your experiences with us and your insights with us. And to everyone listening, please go and have a look at the Homes for Good website and their socials and spread the words about all their properties and the support they offer. You can find them online at homesforgood.org.uk and on Facebook if you search for Homes for Good, and also on Instagram at Homes for Good Scotland. And if you would like more information on Firstport's investment support or our social investment products, including The Catalyst, please visit firstport.org.uk. You've been listening to The Catalyst with Emily Macdonald. Join us next time as we continue to demystify social investment.